Okay. So, a couple of announcements before we get started. Thanks to everybody that's registered. I did update that, and obviously we have met quorum for the June meeting now, assuming everybody actually shows up. So that's as we expected. I don't think that'll be a problem. The only other announcement I have is that while we haven't posted anything on the website, we did officially decide to have EuroMPI USA be a virtual conference this week. There were some policies handed down to me for Intel that meant that I couldn't attend anymore, and I expect that a lot of companies and institutions are going to start having similar policies in the next few weeks that that last a little longer than the kind of summer time frame that we've seen before. So I think it kind of became time to go ahead and make that the final decision. So for any of you that were looking to participate, you still can, and perhaps it'll be even easier to do so now. And while paper submission has closed there, posters is still open. Okay, and that also means that most likely the MPI forum meeting that was attached to that conference will also be going virtual. That was kind of the decision we had made before, is we would, as a forum, we'd follow the lead of the conferences that we were attached to. That was why we decided to make the June meeting virtual when we did, because ISC went virtual at the same time. And so I expect, and we can discuss that here a little bit, and we'll have a final decision, I guess, during the June meeting. I expect that means we'll also be making the September MPI forum meeting virtual. And then we'll need to start discussing meetings a little further down the line. I know, at least for myself, the Intel policy is I can't travel to any conferences for the rest of the year. So again, I imagine many of you will be in similar situations.
And we can still decide whether it makes sense to hold the September one kind of as a hybrid meeting if there is a region of the world where travel is easier. But I think it's pretty clear that we have to make at least open partially for virtual attendance.
Yeah, and if we're going to do some sort of hybrid thing, then really there's no geographic restrictions, at least in my opinion. You can have a portion of people in Europe that meet together if they would find something useful out of it. It could have a portion of the people in the US that want to meet together, and then we can just all be connected during the times we said we were going to be connected. And it essentially becomes different forms of working groups. That's perfectly fine. I think the one thing that we do know is that the times we said, or the times we will say, we haven't specified times for the September meeting yet, will be the times we're actually online, together at the same time. But that doesn't preclude anything else.
Right. But the other thing is we plan on fully keeping the dates as they are right now. There's no need to shuffle those around. We want to stick with the dates, and I think you guys said you want to stick with the dates for the conference as well, correct?
Yeah, roughly. I don't know that we'll necessarily need all of those dates. We haven't figured out the format for how the virtual conference will go yet. We're kind of waiting for a few more of the virtual conferences to actually take place to see how well the ideas that they're planning work out. I know HPDC has some things that they'll be trying out next month, and other conferences have been doing similar stuff. So we have some ideas, but I don't think there's any rush to nail down the format. So this way we can find out what works best.
Yeah, I think by September, you can have plenty of other examples to follow.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, but we did want to go ahead and publish this now so people can start planning.
Sad, but probably to be expected, right?
Yes, I'm sure we will not be the last.
No.
Okay, so that was all I had on announcements. Anything else from you, Martin?
No, I think you said it all. Thanks for summarizing it. I think that's all. It's all good. Is there anything else anybody has a question on what Wesley just said, or any other comments they want to bring up in the general section? Okay, I think that's it for the general announcements.
All right.
We just jump into tickets then, right?
Yeah. Julian, were you able to get your audio working?
Yeah, no, it's better. So I hope that you can hear me well and
Yep.
it will go smoothly for the presentation.
Would you like to present, or do you just want to talk off of my screen?
I can talk off your screen, and if people want to see the actual PDFs, then we can switch and I'll show them.
Sure, and I can download that as well.
Yeah. Okay, so the ticket is about deprecating MPI host. It was an old ticket, and another ticket was also asked by Bill on all the tickets for the pass he has done. It was at the beginning of the year, and all the ticket that Wesley created at the time. So we just removed the old tickets, the new tickets, and I deal with the old ones. So basically, all the change is the proposed change that is listed here. So I search for other mention of host process and MPI host, and there were none that those marked on the page here. Okay, so yeah, can you show the diff? Yeah, great. So first of all, in the list of constant, the MPI host has been removed. So that's the first block. On the changes, there is a reference to the deprecating chapter. So in the deprecate chapter, I added that the MPI host predefined attribute key has been deprecated and might be removed in the next version of the MPI standard. So that's something I took the sentence that was already there in another place in the deprecate chapter. So I just copy paste for the MPI host. And here in the change log, there is a reference to the deprecated chapter saying that on section deprecate since for all the MPI host predefined attribute key has been deprecated. In the context, when talking about group management, there were a sentence mentioning host process. So that the red one that was removed, neither draws MPI specifies the function of the host process, if any. Then you can see in green the text added to the deprecated chapter. So the MPI host predefined attribute key for MPI comrade has been deprecated and may be removed in the future version of the MPI specification.
Just a question, Julien.
Yeah.
I think I had a ticket to remove host process in the context chapter, and we removed a couple of lines, not just one. How does this deal with this previous ticket?
That's a good question. I rebased again the current 4.0 standard.
Yes, okay,
so I don't
because
know if your changes have already been merged to the
no, not yet, not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. So it was a PR number 176. So maybe we should we can do that together and check that it's consistent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll finish on the changes there and just to see if there is comments about the changes, and then we can check, Guillaume, if we overlapped in some way.
Okay, good.
So in the inquiry chapter, there's where the MPI host process is defined. So MPI host process rank, if such exists, MPI procnol otherwise. So this was removed, along with the text defining what is a host rank. So the value returned from MPI host get the rank of the host and fetching. And basically that's all the changes. So it's really removed MPI host, and mention an host process over the whole document. So as to why, it's just that MPI host is not actually defined. It's a key which is here, but it's completely implementation defined. And it's not clear. Well, it's not really useful now to have such key MPI host. So it was decided by the firm to deprecate that. So is there any questions, or do people want to see how the PDF looks like now?
I guess the only question I would have, just for curiosity, because I don't remember that part of the standard, if I ask for an attribute that's not there, so if I have an old code that asks for the host, and now we make this change, not with a deprecation, but later on with the removal, would this break the code, or would they just get back an empty string or some nonsense?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know either how it will behave in that.
Would you remember? Does it become an invalid key because of that or not? I mean, at the end, for the deprecation, it may not be that important, right? But for once we actually remove, we may have to make a choice what happens if someone asks for that.
Yeah.
So do we have, so these are attributes. We have the notion of implementation specific attributes? I guess we do.
Yeah, I think you can set the ones that you want. Yeah.
So I guess it probably, I don't remember everything about attributes the way I remember info keys as well. With info keys, the implementation has to accept anything, whether or not it's valid, and it may return nothing, but it has to at least not crash.
I'm trying to find it.
Non, il n'est pas chargé.
Oh, it's kind of fuzzy with this. It says retrieves attribute value by key. The call is erroneous if there's no key with value. No, it's erroneous if there's no key with value key val. Okay. So if you would turn a code that asks for the host into an erroneous program.
If we deleted it, yes.
If you just deleted it, yes.
Which is probably a good argument for not deleting it in the next couple of decades, but I don't know that that makes a lot of difference for deprecation.
Deprecation should still be fine, or we could add something particular in there that you can still, nobody's supposed to have any meaning attached to it, but if you pass that value, you still get something back, or it's not erroneous to pass that key value, even if it doesn't exist or something like that. You could make it.
Yeah, that's true.
I agree. For the deprecation, it doesn't make a difference. So Julian, the other question is, it's marked as 4.1. Is that what you intended it to be, or would you, if it could be earlier, would you want it earlier, or is it really a 4.1 ticket?
Oh, it was supposed to be marked out for also. Okay. No, if we can put it to 4.0, I think it's okay.
Okay, so we will see where we end up on the timeline.
Yeah.
If there's time, you would want to see it in 4.0. Okay. Any objections to that? I mean, obviously, that's, I hope we agree this is not a gating issue for 4.0, but if it would slip into the timeline, anybody objecting against that timeline? Okay. Let's leave it as that. I think that marking is good, like this double marking. Anybody else any comments or questions on this? Or are we all okay with that? Anybody objecting to this change? uncomfortable with the change?
So I just checked my old.
Sorry, you go ahead.
Yeah, no. So I just checked my old pull request, and the original proposal was to remove the three lines, including the line mentioning MPI host, but other lines at the end of the paragraph in the context chapter. So it's consistent with yeah. So if you take a look at if Wesley could show you have this marked as issue 57 in the context chapter. I saw that. Yes. So the proposal in my PR was to remove all the sentences after see below. The rest of the paragraph was dropped. Yes, exactly this. So it's consistent.
So I missed that before. That's part of a different ticket where you removed this? Guillaume?
I didn't see a link to any other pull requests. Go ahead, Guillaume.
It's pull request 176.
Does your pull request handle all the MPI host and host processing, or only just the two lines?
Yes, just in the context chapter.
Yeah, okay.
We had this discussion, and we agreed to remove the last sentences of the paragraph, and then there was this more larger discussion about MPI host, and then Julien designed as a volunteer to do this pull request, something like that.
Right, I remember that conversation now.
Yeah.
I can't type anymore. That'll at least make a link, even if it doesn't.
Yeah.
Even though it won't close it.
Oh, so there was so I'm kind of confused. There was a competing ticket?
No, this wasn't competing. This was addressing a comment that Bill had made, but in a limited way.
Yeah.
This was trying to make things more consistent, but not necessarily the full proposal of removing MPI host.
Got it. Yeah, now I do remember the two things.
So these two are not exactly competing. They are consistent between each other, so that's good. So if we, because the first one, or because Guillaume's is an errata, so that one could get merged and theoretically backported to 3.1 if we wanted, and then the total deprecation can go into 4.0.
Yep. Okay. Sounds good. So anybody else, any comments on this, or are we good on this section? But there was somebody else who wanted to speak up before. Guess that's not the case. So I think we can move this to the June pile, right?
Yep. I'll go do that before I forget. In the meantime, Joseph, you're up next. Do you want to present things, or do you want me to do it? Because I think you have the next.
I think for the yeah, we can look at this the GitHub page for this one. So this is when I was fixing the example titles in the RMA section, I noticed that the way we write examples is pretty inconsistent. So in some places, examples only have a heading, so one line basically. In some, it's a whole paragraph, and then what sparked this ticket or this PR is that if we have a verbatim environment inside an example and text after that, in some examples there's an indentation, in some examples there's not, and there's one particular instance where we have an example text and another example, and it's absolutely unclear what text belongs to the example and what text is in between. This is in the Wesley, can you increase that window a little bit so that we can see the examples here? So I took screenshots, what that looks like here. So the first code part is example 17. Then there's 2 paragraphs that are part of that example. They're in this example's environment. Then there's a paragraph that is outside of the example environment. This is the part where it reads in the next several examples and so on. And then there's another example, and it's absolutely not clear what belongs where. And I thought that it would be nice to have this to have the same style for the paragraphs inside examples, also to make it easier for the reader to see what is part of the example text and what is not. And then it would also be good to have some additional space because we have space before the example, so it would be nice to have the same space after the example text. So basically, if you scroll down now on this page, there's the second example with this PR. Wesley, can you scroll down a little bit? Yeah, okay. So here now you see that there's no indentation in these 2 paragraphs that belong to the example, and then there's some spacing before the paragraph that is in between the 2 examples. So we do have this indentation for all the paragraphs in the regular text. We don't have indentation for paragraphs in advices, for example. And I think that would make it easier to grasp what is part of an example, because if I don't care about the example, I might just want to skip over it, and I don't want to read every single paragraph just to find out where the standard text continues. So this is basically a proposal that I'm making, and I'm fine with it either way. It's a minor thing. It's just it has been bothering me, so I had to do something.
So if I look at that example of the examples that you have here, which part is example text and which part is normative text?
If you scroll up in the original text, it's absolutely not clear.
Right. Just kind of.
Yes.
I fully agree with that.
Now at the bottom here, you can see what is part of the example because the paragraphs that are not indented are part of the example.
Okay, so you are saying the example goes until requires information exchange only in one direction.
Yes. Yes. And then there's some spacing, so it's clear where the regular text continues.
So.
And the problem with the indentation is we have that in other places as well. So we have, for example, in example 3.1, there is no indentation like it is here now because there's no new line between the verbatim environment and the text inside the example environment. But then there's example 3.14 where the text is inside the example environment, but there's a new line, and so there's an indentation. It's just the way LaTeX sets paragraphs. So that is very unintuitive.
So In this particular example, is the text in the example environment, or is that separate in the tech document?
Those paragraphs that are not indented right now are inside the environment, the example environment.
So basically, so what you change is literally just the example environment, not
Yes.
the actual thing in the tech document, right?
Yeah, there's two changes. One is removing the indentation, and the second is to add this basically the same 11-point spacing that we have before the example, also added after the example, and make sure that it doesn't add it twice if there's two examples following each other without text in between.
So the reason why I'm asking this is the following, because actually, when we talk about the terms over the last couple of days in the terms working group, we came across similar examples where it was really not clear, is the text a normative, is it part of the example, where does it belong to? So I see exactly, I fully agree with your point, as we need to make this more clear. Personally, I'm not sure if what you suggest goes far enough. Because you still have to know that non-indented means not part of the example and indented means not of the example. I think it's very subtle. I wonder if we should do something more drastic.
Yeah, I didn't want to propose putting a framer on. But yeah, I'm happy with going further than that. That was the least invasive solution I could think of.
About this. Nobody have any opinions? That's new in the forum.
I like shaded boxes always for examples. I don't know. We could also look how it is done in OpenMP.
Yeah, so
They have
started pulling out all the examples into a separate document too.
Yeah.
Is there no way to just put the examples together and make reference to the example and try to keep them separate, from the normative text here? Well, at least avoiding having normative text between two examples.
I think that one of the nice things about having the examples in line is that it's easy to make references and show something, especially in these sorts of small examples. You move them all to a single place or another document or whatever, it gets more difficult to read.
Yes.
I get you, but maybe just for these two examples, or just for examples where there is no normative text trying to do something, I don't know the macro, I don't know, but just to ensure that we won't have an example normative text and example.
Oh, I see. Not move it to another place in the standard per se, just say like you would move a figure between pages.
Yes.
I see.
I think that's actually a chapter level change, right? I mean, even making the examples more pronounced is a chapter level.
It probably depends on what we would choose to do. If we were trying to do something more drastic, like put examples in a shaded box to make them even more obvious, that would be something we'd need to do consistently throughout the standard. If we were just trying to move an example within a paragraph or get it on the next page, sure.
Right. But even the shaded box, I think, would be at the end, as long as all chapters do it, could be done by the chapter committees. What we have to double check as the whole forum is whether the right things are in the box, if the example environment has been applied correctly.
There are cases where there is an example with a heading and then a code piece. And then there's actually there's text outside of the example environment describing that example and referencing it through saying example 3.1 describes this, and this. So that is very different style from what is done here in the RMA section in that case. So that maybe that should be normalized as well. Either way, I'm fine with either way. If we just want to have the core part, the code inside the example environment, that's fine. But it should be uniform.
Yeah, I agree with that. Is this something you're suggesting for 4.0 still, or is it something we should do? That sounds like cleanup paths for 4.1, right?
I'm fine with either way. I had some time yesterday and I picked at it until it looked the way I thought it should. But if it doesn't make it into 4.1 because it seems like Pandora's box that we're opening here,
Well,
that's okay.
It's a question how difficult it would be. Would you be able, I mean, since you looked at this now, would you be able to produce a PDF that just takes the example environment and puts a box around it so that we can see how it looks like?
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm not a big fan of like a whole box.
Or a black line.
Just a bar. Yeah. I will put a bar around it. Yeah. Yeah, I can do that.
It's worth just to show this in this forum again and just say this is how it would look like. Is this something that we want to do? Then we can have the old one, your current version that's a little bit more muted, and then the more drastic version. Then we'd have to make a decision whether we want to apply that everywhere or not. And then if we do, I think there would be another one of those global tickets that every chapter committee has to take a look at and see if it's still correct what this ticket did, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I personally like this because I said we ran over this just yesterday in a different part of the RMA chapter where it really wasn't clear what was normative, was not, and led to some debate. And so clarifying this, I think, can only be helpful for the standard. Anybody think this is a bad idea, or this could cause problems? Yeah, then I think why don't we try this? If you're willing to do this, it would be great just to see if we can get the bars next to all examples to the environment, and then let's take a look at the document and see what it looks like now.
Yes, I will do that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that one was pretty easy with the Pythonization. I just had to, if you look at the diff, I just had to remove one of the statements from the Python code. In that case, actually two. So one removes the suppression of the parentheses. Yes. So in both cases, for both parameters, both the buffer and the size, we now have the parentheses saying the buffer's choice and the size is a non-negative integer. And to make it actually a non-negative integer, because it's a size, I changed the vin_attach size in the binding types. I think the reason that we have a separate vin_attach size is because it's mapped to an aint, MPI aint, and not just integer.
Was the binding wrong, or is the
binding was missing these parentheses? What's that called? I don't know. Annotations. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that was the case in the original 3.1 before Pythonization, and I think this just adds it now because it was missing.
Oh, it's one of the things that they caught but didn't want to fix it. They wanted to stay identical. Okay. Mm-hmm.
That's why it had the suppression in there.
Okay.
And we had the same for MPI win_detach, but there it's only the buffer and no size. So the fix is the same.
Okay. Any comments on this one? Any concerns? We can read this as an errata in June as well, and hopefully just get it in.
Yeah, I hope that's non-controversial.
Sure.
As always.
Always, exactly.
That one is actually the most interesting. So this one was discussed a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't speak up back then. But the more I thought about it, I think that the fix that is here, maybe Wesley, there's the annotated PDF if you have it there.
Oh, you have an annotated PDF. Okay.
No, there's a yes, there it is.
Yeah. I'll open that up. Things do not download quickly behind the Intel firewall. Okay.
So this one is an example. Page 45. I think that's what it says there.
45?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what was added here in this PR is the word errand in example 3.9. So it used to read an exchange that relies on buffering, and now it reads an errand exchange that relies on buffering. And the reason why it was marked as errand is because both processes call send before calling receive. So you would think that this is errand. But if you read the advice to users below there, in the third paragraph, it says, many programmers prefer to have more leeway and opt to use the unsafe programming style shown in example 3.9. So here it's called unsafe, it's called errand. And I think that is, semantically, that's a difference. And then, let me, because now the window is hidden, I can't read the rest of the text. Wesley?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes. And then it says, in such cases, the use of standard sense is likely to provide the best compromise between performance and robustness. And then the worst part is quality implementations will provide sufficient buffering so that common practice programs will not deadlock. And I don't know what that means. I mean, first of all, what is common practice? I don't know. Is it sending 2 bytes? Is it sending 1 kilobyte? Is it sending a gigabyte? How much buffer should, I mean, we're basically blaming the MPI implementation if a deadlock occurs, because we say that it's not a quality implementation if it deadlocks, right? Without specifying what is common practice. Plus, I don't think we should call this example errand if we then say, well, it's okay if you do it and rely on an implementation detail. So I think, and we can take this further, if we want to call this errand, what follows is, or we should think about whether that also implies that any application that does not guarantee that all its operations are initiated is an incorrect MPI implementation, right? So how much do we allow users to rely on implementation specifics to still call it a correct application? So the way this ticket is right now, I don't think we should go forward with this. Either we keep it as it is, then we allow this behavior and we allow users to rely on buffering for correctness. I mean, buffering is good for efficiency. That is not the question. But I've been reading the OpenMPI user mailing list, and I think at least twice we told users that they should not rely on buffering. They should always assume.
I think it's. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. You should always assume that the eager limit is 0 byte, right?
Yeah, I think that's been pretty common advice, not just for OpenMPI, but just in general. I mean, I've personally answered questions on GitHub the same way not GitHub, Stack Overflow. It may work, it may not. There's no guarantees. If you want non-blocking, then you use non-blocking.
Yes, so I think we should really think about this third paragraph in the advice to users, because it is completely unclear.
Yeah, I agree. Unfortunately, I did ping Dan, knowing that this was going to be something we discussed, and he couldn't be here today. And since he's the original author of this PR.
Yeah, I think Dan basically took what was in the ticket and put it in here.
Right.
So I don't blame him.
Sure.
This again might be kind of worms that I'm opening here. But either way.
Well, it is, but if we're going to be fixing this section, we do need to fix this section. And I don't know that the fix has to be that controversial. It is an advice to users. It's not normative text, so it's not as if we are changing the semantics of MPI. We're just making it more clear what we're advising users to do. Because you could certainly read this and understand, well, if I send a 8-byte message, that's almost certainly going to be okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. And you'd be right most of the time. But if you send 1 million 8-byte messages, eventually that will stop. Or something else. I mean, there are lots of cases where that could break down. So if we're going to call it erroneous in one place, we should be consistent.
I'm actually shocked this is in there. I mean, this is the first textbook examples you teach students what not to do because it's a bad program.
Yes, I agree.
What do you find when you read the standard? That's amazing.
I had exactly the same enlightenment when I read this advice to users, because I was looking for buffered sending, and I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw it.
Yeah, I mean, this text is also pending. Says to this kind of fits also to some of the discussion we had in the terms of what's blocking, what's non-blocking, what's local, what's non-local. This is actually contrary to what we have in there. Actually, it's contrary to another example that Rolf wants to put in the standard as a counter example. So, yeah, we should definitely fix this.
Just at a glance, I mean, one easy fix, and I don't know if it's the right one or not, but one easy fix would just be to delete that paragraph.
I think even the one above is not really correct, right? You should know about the buffering. A program is not safe or unsafe, whether buffering is not. It's just the semantics of the API that requires you to do certain things or not. You should know what
safe is probably here a synonym for correct.
Yeah.
Right. And certainly, whether the program is correct or not, it should not be whether the MPI is buffering or not.
Right.
I can put up a PR that removes those 2 paragraphs and see what happens.
Sure. I think, well, I don't know that you can make those suggestions on here because they're outside the window of where he's made the changes. I was going to say you could just make the suggestions on this PR, and then Dan could merge them. But you'd have to make a PR to his PR.
I never figured out how to do that. I've seen people doing it, but I guess I could.
You can make
try that.
suggestions easily enough, but only if it's in close to a place that there's already been a change. If you get down here, those plus marks go away. If you want to make a pull request to his pull request, you have to go to his repository and do it there. So that one's a bit more of a hassle.
Yeah, but I don't think I can fork his repository and then make a pull request from that, because I already have a fork of the OpenMPI repository. The MPI, sorry.
I think your existing fork is connected to the magic web of everything that's forked here. I think you could, I don't know. We can talk about it on Slack or something. I think you
but
can,
maybe,
but I haven't tried.
Maybe I can treat that as a separate issue.
Sure, you could just create a competing request, and we could just drop this one too.
Or talk to Dan and see if he can include it as the other option.
Yeah.
I have the feeling he will agree with this.
I'm sure you're probably right. I'm sure he's not looking for the glory of the pull request that adds the word errant to the index.
Looking at the text, if you take those two paragraphs out, the other two paragraphs actually seem to fit together, so that would actually be a safe thing to do.
I don't know that you even have to delete this paragraph, this second paragraph. I think you just need to clarify that it's not that a program is safe or unsafe, it's just that it's correct or not. I think it is helpful in some sense to say that a correct MPI program could replace all MPI sends with MPI sends. It's just that MPI does get it's almost like a hint. By using a regular send instead of an S send, we can potentially optimize that a little bit because the semantics are different. The semantics of an MPI send are, when I return to you, you may reuse your buffer, and that's all you know. But eventually that message will be delivered. The semantics of an S send are, when I return to you, you can reuse the buffer and the message has been matched on the other end.
Right, but this just talks about the internal buffering in the library, right? That's how I read it, at least. Program is safe if no buffering is required for the program to complete. And you don't know whether buffering is required or not. That's an implementation detail of the MPI library. I'm misreading that.
I think you're right. I think it's just pointing out that while an implementation can do this thing, it may not. And it's really there to say, don't rely on this. And this is one case where the way we're doing that internal buffering is somewhat important because of the sort of the normative text that comes just above this advice to users, where we say that some of the messages may be buffered. Well, I guess that's maybe part of the example. Not.
When it's safe is where the program will execute if message buffering is required, if no buffering is required, right? I personally would take the whole paragraph out.
Yeah, that's also fine. I suppose the text, the explanation text with the previous example does say a similar thing. So if we remove that paragraph, it would probably be fine too. All right. You've got something to create a quick PR there.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Is there any other comments, questions on this one? I mean, this is really going to some of the very fundamental things, even though it's only an example. Everybody agree with the assessment we just did?
Yeah, I agree with you, Martin. I think it's better even to try to remove the two paragraphs.
Just a comment. I think it's. I'm trying to figure out why it went into the standard at this point. And the only case I imagine is that there are so many people which run into problems because of the buffering that they don't see a problem, that it is more or less an advice to users that they can see where a problem comes from when they change message sizes, maybe. Not sure if there should be something in like this.
I would imagine this advice to users was in MPI 1 and that it wasn't added later, but though I obviously don't know that for sure.
That's easy enough to find out. There's still a PostScript document for this, right?
Sure.
Compressed PostScript or PostScript? Which one do you want?
You know, I'm going to let you take care of that one.
All right.
I think we can go on to the next one.
Before we go on, a little bit of trivia. How many pages did MPI 1 have?
20? I don't know.
236.
236. And everything since then has just been garbage.
At least it was a unified standard for Fortran and SC in the first place, and not like OpenMP. Mm.
So that one is basically the mirror of the MPI win attach PR. So that's exactly the same.
230 as well, right?
Before we go to that, by the way, Wesley's hunch was right. That text one-to-one copy are still in the in the MPI 1.0 standard.
Okay, so I think for this one, it's pretty much everything you already said for attach. Just again for detach. I should have put them in a different order. Sorry.
That's right. I think that's all I had. I had one more since we're talking about legacy here. The MPI comments mailing list website is not available anymore. I don't know if the mailing list itself is still there, but since it's on page 2 of the standard, there's a URL.
We did change the URL. Yes. It does still exist, but it's in a different place. Yep.
Yeah.
That's a good point. We should fix that.
And since we talked about examples, there are actually examples in the standard that are not marked as examples. In section 6.5, it says motivating examples, and then there are subsections with code, but they're not marked as examples. So I don't know if that is something we want to fix or if that's on purpose.
Is there another issue already on that? Trying to check if all examples are correctly marked.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, maybe. I didn't look at
there is
80-something issues. Yeah. Okay.
We have one. Well, I don't seem to be able to search. Yep. GitHub is trying to be smarter than me, and it's not working.
Okay, I can check for that, and if not, I'll create a ticket. But I think I saw something like that somewhere.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, so that was all we had on the agenda before we started. Is there anything else people want to go over?
I had a comment on ticket I read last time, but it was mainly to respond to Dan's comment last time. So Dan's not here, but I can still do the comment. There is Dan was worried about adding the significant only at root for scatter v, iScatter v, saying that it might break compatibility if people implemented some stuff that some of the arguments were seen in not significantly at root where it should have been. But I checked, and in the text describing the scatter v, iScatter v, it specifically says that these arguments are only valid on the root process. So the fact that the significant only at root is not present on the argument description is really just a mistake, and it should not bring any compatibility issues because the text clearly say underneath that these are not significant on the receive process file.
So it's safe, you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, great. That makes it easier. Thanks. All right. Do we have anything else that anybody wants to bring up? Rosie, do you have anything else?
That's all from me. Next week we're talking about terms.
Yeah, so that's just one comment I would like to make to this, and perhaps to the wrong crowd, but we do want to talk about terms next time. The terms working group wants to bring up the changes they're suggesting for what they had as previous readings, what they see as a general thing, stuff that's happened since then. This is obviously sometimes a controversial issue, so it would be great to have as many people on the call next week as care about this particular issue. So of course, when this group is often anyway here already, so that's why I'm probably preaching to the wrong group. But if you know people from colleagues from other organizations who know that not necessarily always come to this meeting, please ping them. I would like to have a really good representation next week, so we have a sort of a quorum, at least kind of a pseudo quorum, to have a really good image of what the forum thinks before we get this into formal readings and votes and stuff like that. I think it would be really helpful for the working group to have a good participation next week. So please spread out the word, and I will ping people directly too, but I think next week will be very useful to do that. I will write this in the email too, but I know not everybody reads email fully. That's the only thing I wanted to mention. I think it will be very interesting meeting next time, but we need to get a resolution on this, and we need to get a good coverage for that. All right. Anything else from anybody? If not, that was it for me.
That's all for me. So we can go ahead and wrap it up.
Yep, sounds good. Thanks everybody, and see you hopefully all of you plus more next week for the terms discussion.
Thank you. See you next week.
Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.